good morning. It's Christy Shell. Today we are talking about improvisation and how that gives you an outstanding life no matter what happens. So I'm Christy Shell. If you don't know me, I am the owner and founder of Zeal Coaching here in Troy, Ohio. And what we do and what we're especially good at is helping people find and create the life that rocks them. So we love to do that magical thing where we find what is so great and talents about you, what the world really needs you for, what purposes and meaning, and how do we bring that all together and get real clarity about that goal going forward. And so when we do that, we create an action plan and support and different pieces to make you get what you really want and how you really want to live your life so you really can rock your life. But here's what happens. Sometimes life happens to you. Sometimes there's a different plan. Sometimes there's things you need to learn and grow in order to get to where you want to go. But right now, so that piece of understanding how to improvise when things don't go as planned. And I think that is going to be the key to where we're at right now. I've had a lot of clients, good morning Dee, a lot of clients this week talking about, oh, I was so excited things are going to open up or the schools are going to go back. And we keep getting piled on these different requirements and things, and people are really kind of freaking out, and we're at a new kind of anxiety, frustration low. As things open up, we're also learning more restrictions that are on us. So one of the things I really want to talk about today is the idea of how to improvise. So a few years ago, for about a year, I took classes in improv and I performed and was on the stage for about 6 months. So it was about a year-long process that I was working and learning this really fun, obviously comedic kind of thing. But what was really interesting, and I think what everyone needs to understand, is the idea of improv. The number one rule is they say we have to say yes and, okay? This is the number one rule of how to improvise. And so the idea of this is really interesting, especially where we're sitting right now in this year and the issues that are and the things that are going on around us. So this idea of we naturally, when change happens, when things come and we're not prepared and we're surprised, we kind of throw up our hands like, no, I don't want this to happen. I love when, when something's scary or somebody runs up like, no, this is just the reaction. And so many times when something's thrown at people, even when it's not a scary situation, they throw up like, no, I can't do that. And we're quick to kind of, it's a survival thing. It's a scary thing, but we're going to throw up the no sign really quick. Okay. Some of us feel like there's control and no, and I do think there's a lot of value in no. That's a whole other podcast. But sometimes we have to say yes and, okay? So when we are truly not in control or when change is happening over and over again, this idea of yes and is really critical. So in improv and the art of improvisation, like the fun comedic kind, the idea is that you kind of have a storyline in your head. And the whole idea is that you have to drop that storyline and you have to listen to other people. And whatever they give you, you have to say, okay, I'm going with that, or yes, I'm going with that. And I'm going to make it better. And I'm going to amplify it. And so I really want you to think about this. If you could get in your mind or kind of work on the habit of being, okay, that's what's happening now, and how do I make it better? Or how do I work with that? Some of us are really great at this. Some of this is a natural kind of left hand, right hand. We're really good at being in flexibility or adaptation. And some of us really like control and scheduled and like to be planned. And so it's going to vary for different people. But just to understand that if you can start to get in the concept okay, that's happening, and how am I going to deal with it? Or how am I going to make it better? Or how am I going to amplify it? Because that idea of resistance is really strong in us a lot of times, okay? And so we have to really understand right now, we do not have control. We do not have control of anything. The people who think they have control don't have control. The people who want to have control don't have control. So the people are trying to make decisions for the best part of, the best number of people and for the people's health. So I think it's really interesting. So I don't want to argue facts about that. I just want you to understand that if you naturally go to resistance, if you naturally go to, oh, no, like, you are really going to be suffering. So the definition of suffering is thinking reality should be different, okay? So the one thing is you can impact reality, but when something is real and fixed, we think we have to change it, or we think we can, and the gap between what's really happening, what we think should be happening, is suffering, okay? So when we're in improv, if I'm thinking about a storyline and my brain is going down, we're walking in the woods and we run into a witch or whatever, for example, and somebody else is like, we're walking in the woods and we run into a lake. We have to start flexing that around that. And so it becomes really fun. But how improv is that idea of fun. You kind of go, okay, I'm going to get curious to see where this goes. I'm going to have a more playful mindset. I'm not going to be so in goal looking. I'm going to look for like, what's the possibilities and what potentially could happen, and how could we build it and make it more than it was. So how can we grow it and make it more fun and be more interesting? And this is really hard for people when they naturally are about the end game, okay? Now, we do need end game people, but this idea of being flexible is really key. So like right now in business or in your work team, or even like working like at home, we have had to learn to, be more flexible, right? And be more, and kind of adapt pretty easily and pretty quickly. That adapting time is not over. I just want to invite you to kind of like, okay, more and this is the whole series of improv. I say something, and then the guy I'm improving with, he says yes and in his mind, he adds, makes it better. I say yes and then I add. So we have to really kind of get into this mindset of thinking about how do we yes and a situation. Again, there's times to say no. There are times to like set up boundaries. That is not what we're talking about here. We're just talking about how do you survive? How do you thrive sometimes? How do you get to a place where you aren't resisting and fighting and really angry and resentful and those kind of things when there isn't a control, when you're not really in control? And so what can you yes and? So we get new requirements about schools. Yes, and how are we going to do that? Yes, it's like people or parents are really struggling with this idea right now. Teachers are really struggling with this idea. So we kind of have to put our mourning of that a little bit on the side and flex easily. This is how people are surviving and making better business decisions, getting more creative. Yesterday, we saw an ad where a bar is having people wear giant tire tubes and to keep their 6 feet. Like, it's silly, but it's fun and it's kind of novel and silly. But the idea is that it is a joyful, silly way of going, yes, and how can we make this better? I'm not saying it's a good example, but it is a funny thing. So understand, what is your way of saying yes and? What are you feeling that you're naturally resisting and kind of suffering or struggling with? And where or how can you be like, okay, and how can I make this better? So this is Christy Shell with Zeal Coaching. Please contact us. We have a lot of fun high school students coming in ready for their senior year or ready for their junior year in college and career planning. Also, we have some good workshops coming up in the next month or so that I'll be advertising very soon. So please stick with us. We'll see you next Friday. And please think about, how do you improvise your life so that you can make it no matter what. Thanks.